So let's all give a big hand for our Los Angeles County Fire Department. Stephanie, would you come on up and take the podium, please?
My name is Stephanie English, and I'm the Community Services Liaison to LA County Fire Department, which just is a fancy way of saying I'm here for all of you. So if you ever need anything, Al knows how to get a hold of me. During an incident or major emergency, if you needed information, Al would most likely be my point of contact to disseminate that information. But we have some very special guests with us here tonight, and what I'd first like to do is kind of give you a little background about this fabulous organization that I have the pleasure of working for, LA County Fire Department. I always qualify my introduction by saying I think that LA County Fire is arguably the world's greatest fire organization. Our firefighters train regularly, train hard, and the whole purpose that we're here tonight is to talk about our USAR team, our Task Force 2 team, that have been deployed many times throughout the world. And what that means is that our USAR Task Force 2 team, as we call it, has been approved and certified by a team of United Nations inspectors that we are qualified to go internationally for any kind of disaster relief. And it means we have the equipment and the training and the personnel to quickly deploy anywhere in the world. Our firefighters that deploy on those missions need to be able to be self-sustaining for 2 weeks, is it? 2 weeks, meaning they have to have all their own self-care supplies and food and not be dependent on that other country or anybody else to take care of them when they get there. There's only 2 teams in the world that are certified as an international deployment teams, and Doug will talk more about that. But without further ado, I just would like to just remind you that these firefighters that are here tonight from Fire Station 107, right here on Soledad, are the same that went to Japan and went to Haiti and went to New Zealand and trained like this, are the same firefighters that respond to minor traffic collisions, respond to wildland fires. We have the best of the best in LA County Fire. And what I would like to do is first introduce, where's the rest of the engine? Are they out coming in slowly and surely? A little couch fire. Oh, okay. They're handling it. They're handling it. Half crew. See, the best of the best. They can handle things. I'd like to introduce first our Battalion Chief, Ted Lindeman, in the back. And crew from Fire Station 107. Half a crew. And oftentimes folks will ask me about the rank structure. Most people aren't familiar with the rank structure. Our Battalion Chief Lindeman is one of 6 battalion chiefs in the overall Santa Clarita Valley that have the responsibility for all operational responses that occur in their jurisdiction and responsibility for all the fire stations within their jurisdiction and the personnel. And then underneath the battalion chief level is Captain Doug LeCount, who has responsibility for the response from his fire station and all the personnel in his fire station. So it sometimes helps to define that, and I know people enjoy it. But Captain Doug LeCount from Fire Station 107 was in Japan and also went to Haiti. Behind the scenes, he supported the USAR team that went to New Zealand. And there's quite an effort that's invisible to all of us that happened behind the scenes to support the families and the communication with Washington. And our firefighter, Brian Clayton, firefighter-paramedic Brian Clayton, also from Fire Station 107, was in Japan. These gentlemen train on their own time to continue with their urban search and rescue training. These 2 in particular also happen to teach our CERT classes. How many people have taken CERT? CERT? Oh my gosh. Al, this is not good.
A lot of potential recruits.
This is a class in and of itself. Do you know what CERT is? Community Emergency Response Team Training. And The CERT class, which I encourage you, the City of Santa Clarita offers it, our firefighters teach it, and then there's several classes you can get on the fire department website and look at where those classes are. They're posted on our website as well, and of course our firefighters teach those classes. I encourage you to take that class. That's why we're partly here tonight, to talk about what can happen. One of the things I'm sure Doug will tell you is how well the Japanese people responded, how well prepared they were, how well they came together to handle the difficulties. And CERT will teach you how, if you don't have firefighters or first responders available to you, CERT will teach you what you can do in the meantime, how you can take care of your family and your neighborhood. So, Al, we gotta start promoting CERT in your group out here in your community and get some signers. So, okay, Captain, I'm sorry.
Where's Station 107?
On Soledad. Yeah, real close, yeah. We actually, I should add, we actually have 6 new fire stations that are will be opened and in service this year and next year. The first one this year will be Fire Station 156 on Copper Hill. And 3 of those stations are in the unincorporated areas and 3 are in the city of Santa Clarita, but they all service the overall Santa Clarita Valley. So look for those 6 new fire stations. So, Captain LeCount, Brian Hinesley, thank you.
Stand behind here, you'll be immortalized.
I like walk. Could that be right here?
Well, because, that way we can hear you.
Okay. I'm not a podium guy either, but I guess Al says I have to stay back here, so we'll make it work. Stephanie, thank you for the introduction. Al, thanks for having us. Thank you, everybody. I'm Doug LeCount, captain at 107 on the C shift. Been there for about 3 years. Brian Clayton's been there, firefighter paramedic Brian Clayton's been there 6, 7 years? How long?
Almost 8.
Almost 8 years. So a long time, lots of Canyon Country service from Brian especially. I grew up in this area as my grandmother made sure you knew about, passed on by Al. God bless her. And Brian, you did some schooling here, right?
Yeah, I was pretty much
Yeah,
born
in and out.
here as
Yeah.
a small child all the way up till
Yeah.
about 8 or 9 years old, and then came back in my early 20s and
Yeah.
been here ever since.
So we've seen this place grow astronomically, as like many of you have that have been here for a while. A lot of changes, and our department is growing with it to serve the community. So we're here to talk about primarily our task force, our USAR task force, and what it is. It's a 74-member, multidisciplinary, heavy Type 1 rescue task force. So what that means, it's multidisciplinary. So we have firefighters, paramedics, structural engineers, ER physicians, communications specialists, logistics specialists, tech specialists, K-9 handlers, whole 9 yards. We're supplied with a lot of equipment, and we go on military aircraft usually anywhere in the world. We're almost always on call. So in that sense, we're kind of like a military unit, and I like to tell the guys in the fire department, the guys and gals in the fire department that aren't on the team, that we're like the special ops, special forces, Not quite SEAL Team 6, but we're working on it, But we have fun in it. The people that are involved in it volunteer take whole weeks and weeks of classes on their own time to get on the team. So it's prestigious to get on the team, and it requires a lot more dedication than the average firefighter has in the station. We're going to talk about Japan. Well, first of all, back up to the team again. Some of the deployments we've been on in the past, starting in the 90s, was the Oklahoma City bombing. Components, either as full team or elements of our team, responded to 9/11. The Pentagon, we had a full team deployment to Katrina, Hurricane Katrina in 95. We had members go to the tsunami in the Indian Ocean later that year. And we went to Haiti. I was in Haiti last year. And then New Zealand in January. I didn't go on that deployment. Neither did Brian, but I was behind the scenes doing support for 2 weeks to support our team in New Zealand for that. And coincidentally, the night I got released from the New Zealand support, I get home after not being home for 2 weeks. And I turn on the TV, and lo and behold, what do I see on TV? A tsunami. And I'm thinking, well, this doesn't look like the Indian Ocean footage. It just looks a little different. So I turn up the volume. Earthquake in Japan. It's calling it 8.9 at the time. I'm like, we got to go. There's no way we're not going on this. Sure, I told my wife, and she's like, okay, well, you're sleeping on the side by the phone. And sure enough, about 4 hours later, I get a call in the middle of the night, respond back to Pacoima. That's where we operate out of with all your gear. So that was the turnaround from New Zealand to Japan. So here we go. So that night we got the alert. We go to Pacoima with all our gear. Brian's going to talk a little bit about what that entails. So when we get to Pacoima, our check-in requirements and all that.
It's one of those things, there's an automatic phone call that we get, and we get an email, we get a text message, and it's an alert system. Used to be old days, they'd try to call our houses, or we'd have pagers, and that didn't always work out so great. But as soon as we possibly can, we respond to our Pacoima warehouse. And there's a whole check-in process, and you can imagine the logistics of having more than just 74 people show up, because you have the entire team showing up. So there might be 150 or 200 members all showing up, all wanting to be the first one there, wanting to go somewhere. So there's logistics involved with where do we park our vehicles? How do we tag our keys in? There's medical check-ins, blood pressures need to be checked, medications, updates with any medical conditions. We don't want anybody going on a deployment who's sick or getting sick or may have some issues. That'll be a hindrance to the mission that we're about to perform. Not to mention we're carrying, about 180, 200 pounds of gear with us, personal gear.
Personal gear.
And as before mentioned, we have to sustain ourselves for 2 weeks. And then at the same time, we have tons and tons of equipment that need to be palletized and loaded and be ready to get on either a military transport or sometimes a civilian transport if we're going by air internationally. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes, a lot of firefighters, a lot of our brush camp crew, young men show up out there first thing in the morning, and they're helping with this logistics process. Doug and myself were both in the military before, as were a lot of the firefighters that are on this team. And it helps out a bunch that we had that experience, because that's kind of the very similar experience that the military members have when they deploy. As a matter of fact, I think we got one of the best kudos from anybody.
From the Air Force.
Logistics personnel said that we were the most squared away team they ever worked with, including other military, other Army, be it Navy or Marine Corps, that they have ever moved, loaded, or unloaded in the past. So we took that as a huge compliment to our logistics personnel that work with us, that they are completely dialed in. A lot of training is involved with that. So we go through this big check-in process. There's things like, I'm a medical specialist, so I have to go to Olive View Hospital to pick up drugs and things like that for the team. Canine medications for our canines to take care of. Everything that our doctors order is best we can do to set up a mobile medical site wherever we're going and to take care of our people, number one, and then hopefully perhaps the victims, number two. And this is all happening, minute to minute to hour, and then we have this magical time where we're supposed to go somewhere. And that, once again, we're all used to the military. Hurry up, and okay, we got 3 more hours. We have 6 more hours, but at any given time, we need to be ready to go. Now, then there's the whole transition process of getting to the airport or getting to March Air Force Base, where we're taking military aircraft. For this Japan deployment, it worked very smoothly, was to get our equipment on a military aircraft headed towards Japan. And the personnel, we were going to share an aircraft with Virginia Task Force 1, which is the one other USAR task force in the United States that is certified to deploy overseas. They mobilized in the same manner we do, same training that we have. They got an airplane, flew across the United States, landed at LAX, where we were waiting. We were there at a private terminal. Actually, I think it was the Lakers terminal, private terminal. Kind of interesting, very nice.
They won't be using that for a while.
Yeah. But we loaded onto a government chartered aircraft. So it's just a plain airplane, no markings or anything like that. But it was just a chartered airliner. And it worked out really good for us to have both teams on there start to be able to interact and talk on our way to where we're going. So there's a thing that we call in the fire department sizing up, and we start sizing up from the time we get a call, or even before we get a call with our training. Same thing with this tsunami disaster. From what we had seen on the TV, what we had heard on the radio, and from what we had been told throughout this entire time, we were already sizing up in our minds of what we were going to expect, or what we thought we might expect. Worst case scenario, because we were always preparing for the worst. So we were able to speak with the Virginia Task Force, what they were expecting, what we were expecting, and we had some time on the aircraft to figure these things out, and also try to maybe get some rest, because some of us didn't have a whole lot of sleep in this transition.
No.
We made our way to Alaska, where we stopped for fuel, and then on our way to Japan. We arrived at Misawa Air Base in Japan, which was also running on generator power from the earthquake. They were quite far north of Japan, but you got to figure all of Japan felt.
Well, they were in Japan. They were North Island. North of the affected
Japan,
area.
yes.
Yeah.
They weren't really affected by the tsunami, but the earthquake damage, the power was down, but, and they were short on personnel. And this is something we tend to forget. Every military installation is short on personnel because there's Afghanistan and there's Iraq going on. So I think I mentioned to Doug once or twice, why are there a lot of high-ranking NCOs and officers moving our equipment around and doing this? Because when I was in the military,
I didn't see that. I never saw
that. You know, the lower grade enlisted men, and then I talked to one of these gentlemen, and they're like, well, all the young guys are deployed. Oh, that kind of makes sense. So these guys were working, you know, nonstop 12-hour shifts and so forth to support their own base and to support us now with this disaster. Okay. But it worked great out. It worked really good for us. Good hard work.
We'll move on because we only have 20 minutes. Okay, my friend put together this PowerPoint. It's really meant to be a long PowerPoint. I'm going to breeze through it really quickly. So we're in Misawa Air Force Base. Okay, so they've had a lot of, here's the worst earthquakes in history right here, or deadliest earthquakes in history. So Port-au-Prince was actually the second. There was one in China in '76 that was worse. Okay, the area that we worked in Japan, I didn't know anything about Japan, never been there. When we got there, they assigned us from Misawa Air Force Base to an area called Ofunado and Kamashi. There were two fishing villages, towns, both approximately 40 to 50,000 population apiece. To get there from Misawa took about a 6-hour bus ride. So most of the team went by bus, and then part of the team went by Japan Defense Force helicopters. Turns out this area has had a long history of destruction. They both had tsunamis back in 1896, and then another one, I think, in the early 1900s. Many people killed. That's what it looked like. That's a photo from 1896 in Ofunado. Very similar to what you're going to see that we saw. A lot of the fishing fleets were out at sea during the earthquake, the original earthquake in the 1800s. They knew nothing about it because in the deep water, a tsunami go right under you and you don't even get a ripple because it's deep water. The waves are within the depth, so they go right under you. But when they came back to shore, their town, their livelihood, everything was torn apart. Here's Kamaishi, 1933. So that's a picture of a canyon. That's probably several miles from the ocean. That's how far these tsunamis travel. Okay, we'll buzz through that. So that's a little map of where we were. Misawa Air Force Base was up here that we landed. So bus ride all the way down to this area where we actually staged our boo right up here at high. Our boo is our base of operations that it's like our camp that we set up base at to operate. We wanted to make sure we were far above tsunami or sea level, right? So we were 1,000 feet above it. We're actually in the snow. We had to drive about half an hour to get down to the operational area. The epicenter of the quake was off the Sundai, and Kamashi's right here, Ofunaga's right here, so you can see it was a direct hit with the tsunami where we were operating. Japan has, like Stephanie kind of touched on already, the best disaster preparedness in the world, bar none. And they also have the #1 tsunami and earthquake warning system. The tsunami warning system consists of several hundred sensors on the ocean floor all the way around the islands. So they got the alert, and because of that, they saved a lot of lives. I mean, a lot of lives. So you guys all saw images like that. You probably saw more images than we saw of the initial tsunami, because when we got the alert, we really didn't watch any TV. When we got there and then when we finally showed up, we saw the aftermath of all this. But we saw a lot of video and stuff of water coming through. It was pretty incredible. And I always thought of a tsunami as just a giant wave, crush, and bam, but it's really like a sustained river. I describe it as like the Columbia or Mississippi River, that wide and just coming and coming and coming nonstop. And eventually everything in its way collapses. It's kind of water disturbance you saw just prior to it. So once again, it's like being caught in a flash flood. You all saw those images. Boats, tractors. We saw, D9 bulldozers tossed like toys. All through the streets. You guys see this one? Fire, debris on fire floating away. Even some of the fire engines got caught. Lots of cars, ships. So what we did, guys, is we were assigned to search for live victims. That was our primary mission. In the process of looking for live victims, we came across deceased individuals. At that time, we did mark where they were, GPS or location, and pass that information on to the Japanese government. So we had to search everything. Structures, anything that was at the water level. And it was pretty amazing. Anything at the water level, was pretty hammered. Just saturated everything. If you went into a house where the first level was hit by the tsunami, everything was tossed around. You couldn't even walk through there. Upstairs was fine. But we had to check everything. Cars, boats, anything where somebody could have been. So a lot of area to check. This was a Japanese Defense Force aircraft doing recon for us prior to us getting there of the Ofunado areas. The water's still actually up into the valley before it receded. That's another shot of that. So command boards, with these international deployments, we work with a lot of different international teams. Kind of like our automatic or mutual aid system in California, where if we get something really big, other agencies come and help us, and if somebody else gets something big, we go help them. We all help each other out on the big stuff. Well, it's becoming this way on an international level now, which is good, and we're working together. It's pretty. Haiti was kind of so many teams coming in, and it was kind of chaotic for the first few days, but then everything kind of meshed out. Japan was pretty squared away. Okay, once again, like Stephanie mentioned, we are one of two teams that go international. So actually we're under the FEMA system, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We're one of 28 teams within the United States that are heavy rescue. But we're one of two teams under USAID, OFDA, which is Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, that can go international, us in Fairfax. So that's our Pacoima facility we operate out of. That's on the way to Haiti. That's all 74 members of our team and about 55,000 pounds of equipment on one aircraft, C-17 Air Force aircraft. stuff. That's the base of operations that we were, it was pretty cold. It was pretty cold. We all stayed in a gymnasium at an elementary school, so that was good. We didn't have to stay in tents this time. But we shared the gym with Fairfax's team and a team from the United Kingdom. We're all sleeping on cots about 2 feet away from each other. And the first thing I thought of is, we better talk to these UK guys and the Virginia guys that if we get an aftershock, which is highly likely at night, to stay where they're at, don't panic. Because they're not used to earthquakes, you know. I can see just a stampede in this gym, you know.
We were actually told, hey, you California guys, get with the Virginia and UK guys, and educate them about earthquakes a little bit. Don't go running out the doors and freak out. Tell them what they need to do. And they also told them, if you see us going, just, then you're good. Do what we do.
Do what we do, yeah. So each city we worked in, we basically divided it up. We take a map, divide it up, and said, okay, Fairfax, LA County, UK, we take that section. Kind of like we divide up brush fire in a sense. And we were responsible for search operations in those areas. And it kind of looked like that. That's actually one of the photos of the area that we worked. That was the first day. So we started with the houses, and you worked your way to the debris piles in there. So anybody know how high the tsunami got? Yeah, it was a surge, but it also got pretty high. Anybody have an idea? Yeah, you're pretty close. You're pretty close. Turns out a researcher from the University of Tokyo, 90 feet high. Well, I guess that is pretty close, isn't it?
I think it was more like 30 meters.
Out there.
Yeah, who uses the metric system? The size of a 10-story building. Okay, it's pretty tall. So you can see where water came all the way up there at that canyon and then receded back out. So what were some of the considerations that I had as a rescue squad officer for when I was over there? Well, as you can imagine, a secondary tsunami, okay, because we were having aftershocks. We actually had some tsunami warnings while we were there, and we were working down the lowlands that had already been saturated. So I always identified a safety zone, and our safety zone in this case was high ground. So if we're near a hillside, I told my crew, if we got the warning, we're headed for high ground. And if we couldn't make it to high ground, we looked for a tall building that survived the initial tsunami that was high enough. So we always thought about that. You guys think of something else that might have been a concern to us as far as our safety over there? Sure, or debris and walking on stuff and buildings collapsing, all that usual stuff. But something unusual that... Radiation. That's the one. First for me, 22 years in the fire department. I got, when I was a brand new probationary firefighter going through the academy, I was trained on radiation, and I never really thought I'd ever have to use that stuff. Well, guess what? We had meters with us, and we monitored the whole time. Everywhere we went, we monitored radiation levels. So it was a concern. We were actually about 100 miles north of the Fukushima Daiichi plant. We never got any readings. Unfortunately, we had winds blowing the opposite direction the whole time. So, but was it on my mind? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we could toss that other one on, sir.
Something Captain McCall mentioned about preparedness. And we have our CERT programs and so forth here, and they have something very similar, actually, more involved in that in Japan. Something they have based on the tsunami being a Japanese word, they're used to this stuff. But some of their warning devices, they have these humongous speakers. Every town has them, and I think the military said the definition of it, Japanese translation, was the big voice. So they have a big voice in every town that gives them chimes throughout the day, lunchtime, dinner time, things like that, or any major announcements. Well, these are tsunami warnings also. Every town that is near the coast has them. They heed these warnings. Unlike, we're pretty busy people in America, and we tend to, evacuations, things like that. I got stuff to do. The people in Japan heed those warnings because they've been through and they have a history of it. And I think Doug can attest, that helped them out tremendously. I think we all came over there expecting to see thousands and thousands of deceased people, and it was, I don't want to say the opposite of what we expected, but it was a lot
In a
better.
good way.
Yeah, in a good way. It was a lot better than we expected. So, and I think.
A lot
part
of
of it was
property,
just
massive
preparation.
property destruction, but
Oh.
everything, that could all be replaced.
Mhm.
You know, the human toll could have been a lot worse, and fortunately, they were on top of it. They were on their game. They practiced
Yeah.
this stuff. They all know what to do, and they got out of the way immediately. Okay, so here's some photographs that I took. They're not in any particular order, so we'll go ahead and share those. Now, that right there is an aerial shot of the power plant, just for no particular reason, and throw it in there. Okay, sir? Okay. Just an area we're working there. That's the Kamaishi, north end.
Is that a railroad bridge or?
That was no, that was a vehicle bridge. Mhm. Yeah, just keep going through there. Fast to get a stop. So we're going through structures right there. That was the base again. Okay. That's a C-17 we used to transport our, that was actually Haiti right there, but that's the aircraft we use to transport our equipment. Okay. Okay, a lot of cars. Cars tossed everywhere. I found cars in 2- and 3-story buildings just shoved in places. You're like, how did that car get up there? But some of the fatalities we did find were in cars. And they were probably trying to get away from the tsunami and got caught. So we had to check every car. And we physically checked the car and put a C on there for check. So they knew that was done. Okay, sir? Okay, sir? So that building there, that was one of my safety zones. I was telling my crew, if we had another tsunami, say go to the top floor there. That was a heavy excavator tossed like a toy. Checking that. The Japanese command team here, we're actually working for the Japanese. So these guys were the equivalent of what we would have as a branch director or division supervisor here in the United States. As you can see right there, the tsunami took out the first floor, top floor is fine. Kind of look at the drop. Okay, searching. That's actually a photo from Haiti. We didn't really have much of that heavy braking stuff in Japan. That's Japan right there. That's more likely what it was, just lots of tinker toys and furniture and clothing and cars and everything just mixed together. This device this gentleman has in his hand right here is that's a search cam. We'll bore a hole through a wall and stick that thing in there to see what's behind a wall. We also have sensors called Delstar sensors that are really sensitive listening devices. Can I put it back now? Yeah. This here, just to show you the force, here's a concrete steel reinforced building that was actually a block up here. It floated down to here and stopped at that bridge. Can you imagine if you're riding that thing? Okay. Another victim. A lot of fish laying around. That's another interior aircraft shot. Like I said, in no particular order. That's one of the Japanese helicopters we used. This is one of our canines, and this is common. They'll sometimes cut themselves on the debris that we crawl over. And one of our ER docs is tending to them. Put a boot back on them, went right back to work. So. And the kids love the dogs. Everybody loves the dog. Whenever we get back on these deployments, everybody wants to know about the dogs. It's all about the dogs. Here, another fire engine got caught. You know, I don't know what the status is on that crew. Hopefully they made it out. I don't know. That's back at Pacoima. It's the Air Force at Massawa helping us out. They helped us out tremendously. Great guys. And that was back in Haiti. That's actually a victim in Haiti we're pulling out right there. I think that's all the photos I got right there, sir. So you got anything else to add to that? The other thing is, like, once again, I'm going to touch again on CERT training, you guys. and just disaster preparedness in general, I hope you all at least revisit the stuff once a year, you know, not twice a year. I hope you all have disaster kits. Make sure, you know, you get your water's changed out once a year, batteries, you know, at least have enough stuff to sustain you for at least 72 hours. Because anything really big goes down, we're going to be taxed. We're going to be so busy. And to get help over here, if it's really big, it could take 2 or 3 days. So we're used to having the basin in LA County. The great thing about our department is we can pull from other areas of the county, which is true. But you guys remember, you guys been here for a while, what happened to 71 quake with that 514 interchange? What happened to 94 that interchange? So guess what's going to happen next time? I was a betting man. Probably. They make it stronger every time, for sure. But the earthquakes that we've had were really considered moderate earthquakes. They weren't the big one. So, you know, the big one, those things are going to go down again, which kind of isolates us up here in the North County. So, once again, we encourage you all to be prepared on an individual basis, take care of your families, take care of each other, and if you feel that it's your place to help out in a greater capacity, you can get involved in the CERT program. And community emergency response teams will put you through training. Brian and our instructors, and we touch on first aid and search operations and how to put out small fires and how to organize and what to do in case of disaster, so they augment the fire department and the sheriff's department and help out.
The CERT team is a force multiplier for us as the fire department, or for the emergency responders that are going to be overwhelmed by emergencies, as you could imagine, in a major earthquake or major disaster. We're not going to be able to make it to every neighborhood, every house. We may be digging ourselves out so we can do better help. So these CERT members are going to be huge for us. They're going to be in charge of their block. They're going to be in charge of maybe a group of 5 houses. But they're going to be able to take their neighbors, get them incorporated in helping themselves out and being self-sufficient. So when the fire department goes by that neighborhood, we can talk to that CERT member and say, hey, we have it covered. We'll go on to the next neighborhood. So these are huge things. So if you feel that you want to get involved and that's something for you, please, we encourage it. Absolutely. Love
Yep.
to see that.
Okay, I think we can take some questions at this time. Do we have time, Al? Okay. If we have any questions?